Hey guys, this is Drabble here, and welcome back to Ace Attorney. Now, we are in the second part of the trial phase for Rise from the Ashes, and I believe this time we'll be speaking to our new witness, Jake Marshall, who is apparently not in the courtroom yet. The court will now reconvene for the trial of Miss Lana Skye, and then didn't come back. Allow me to call the next witness to the stand. The officer in charge of guarding the evidence room on the day of the crime. And he's still drinking alcohol in the court. Witness, please state your name and occupation. Me, partner? Oh, I'm just a wandering man, same as you, wandering the trails of civilization. Occasionally helping the utterly cross intersections when needed. Yes, we get it. Oh, I know, you're a patrolman. As for my name, if you'll listen hard enough, you can hear the howling wind calling it out. To be exact, it's Jake Marshall, Your Honor. Howling wind? I've never heard Edgeworth described that way before. Now, Mr. Marshall, let me ask you something. You were in charge of guarding the evidence room on the day the crime took place? Is this correct? According to the papers, partner. What do you mean? A desperado's soul is as boundless as the desert sands. No paper can sum it up. Maybe it's best we get on with this quickly. Please share with us your testimony of the day of the crime. In plain old English. I mean, technically he is speaking Old English, unfortunately. My job was to keep a wary eye on that bone orchard. They say I was supposed to make rounds 3 times a day, but that ain't my style. Besides, the room's protected by 2 security systems anyway. If I remember right, it was at a street-side saloon at the time it went down. I'm just an innocent traveling man, so if you're out of ammo, it's time to hit the trail. So you weren't doing your job, is what I'm hearing. I can't say I particularly care for your attitude. I can't say I care for your beard, but you don't see me complaining. Wait a minute. What do you mean by 2 security systems? I mean the security cameras and the ID card reader. I reckon even a cowpoke like you knows about those. Yes, well, what about the fingerprint-activated locks and the evidence lockers? Fingerprint-activated locks? What kind of newfangled doohickeys are those? It's not being very helpful. It's not that good with machines or with following orders. Everyone's got their weaknesses. Now don't they, Mr. Prosecutor? This one seems like trouble. Okay, Mr. Wright, it's all yours. Also known as, you don't want to deal with him either. My job was to keep a wary eye on that bone orchard. How exactly did you keep an eye on the evidence room? Just made sure nothing moved in the security camera monitor. That room's so still. Even time dies in there. I was just a caretaker who interred the recordings. You interred them? Videos of nothing aren't that useful. When the time would come, I'd erase the tape. Nothing unusual is recorded. Tapes are to be erased every 6 hours. Each time I erase a tape, I feel like I was erasing a part of my life. This guy has a flair for the dramatic, but it isn't going to do him any good. So in actuality, you don't physically enter the evidence room. They said I was supposed to make rounds 3 times a day, but that ain't my style. Don't you make your rounds on the day of the crime, right? Ain't you heard a word I said, partner? I told you that ain't my style. I'm afraid I don't understand. No desperado I know lets rules get in his way. No desperados I know join the police force. So Officer Marshall, on the day of the crime. Just between you and me, I didn't set foot in the evidence room that day. There was a rubber glove stuck in the victim's locker. Do you know anything about that? Sorry, partner, can't say I do. Haven't been in that crypt in weeks. How does this guy avoid being fired? Besides, the room protected by 2 security systems. Street side saloon when it went down, where and when. What were you doing in a place like that? I was eating spaghetti. Not even Angel's steak lunches can beat that Parter's vongole sepa pasta. Do you mean to tell us you abandoned your police duties to eat some noodles? Not all desperados eat tacos, partner. That's not what I meant. I hope this at least taught you a lesson. That's strange. That's usually what Edgeworth says. Did you not want to raise this year? I'm just an innocent traveling man, so you're out of ammo this time to hit the trail. I'm gonna save, because that's how I do. But I'm going to ask him about, the fact. I have his, he said he didn't go in, but I do have his fingerprints. Oops. Your Honor, that statement contradicts this evidence. Oop. I think it's trying to say, did I turn on sticky keys? No, I do not want to. It does. I don't see anything that's contradictory. Huh? Really? Objection overruled. Think before you make accusations. Okay. Place the room's protected. You used to be a detective, so you used this evidence to remember the past, correct? Of course. Back in the day, my locker was a gold mine of evidence. And yet, you didn't know about the fingerprint locking mechanism? Sorry, partner. I ain't good with machines. I couldn't even tell you how bike works. That's quite, incredible. The sensors on the Leica handles have not been seen. It's well known that some detectives are unaware of their presence. Now that he mentions it, Detective Gumshoe says something like that too. At any rate, it doesn't seem that this is relevant to the crime. Can you tell us what you were doing when the crime took place? If I remember right, I was at a street side saloon when it went down. Just an innocent man. Is this where I'd be like, hey, why? Officer Marshall, doesn't it strike you as odd, that is, you being called in to testify like this? After all, you weren't in the security room at the time of the crime, and yet you dragged me down here. Explain yourself, partner. It's quite simple. You left a very large trail behind at the scene, or to be exact, a handprint. Listen real good, partner. Like I said, I'm the caretaker of that crypt. I pay my respects, that is, make my rounds about once a month. It's only natural my fingerprints would be in there. I only wish it were, officer. But you see, your fingerprints were covered in blood. Witness, what's the meaning of this? Your blood-stained fingerprints were at the crime scene? The blood was wiped away. However, the luminol test clearly revealed this. Well, Officer Marshall, it seems to me there ain't a person in this room with a head on his shoulders. I take it you have an explanation then, Officer Marshall? About the blood-stained fingerprints? Very well, you may begin your testimony about your fingerprints, found at the scene of the crime. Thank you. So I just pressed him on that evidence too early. Like I said, it's only natural for my fingerprints to be in the evidence room. One of them just happened to be at the same place as the blood-stained handprint. The murderer touched the locker where my fingerprint was by chance. Bloodstain and the fingerprints are completely unrelated. Or didn't you know the murderer was wearing gloves? See, I had nothing to do with it. Wait, how do you know the murderer was wearing gloves? The The witness explanation appears to be valid, although there's room for doubt. Life wouldn't be fun without any doubt, partner. The defense may now cross-examine the witness. Hiding something, I can feel it, now it's my chance to prove it. Like I said, it's only natural for my fingerprints to be in the evidence room. One of them just happened to be the same place as the blood print, which was... So then, what about the bloody handprint? Wasn't mine, it's still a mystery. Please explain. My locker is covered with my fingerprints. Just so happened. The murderer touched the locker and my fingerprints to those victims. Is that your locker? The chances of that happening are 1,000,000 to 1. On the contrary, one could just argue the opposite. The chances of that not happening are 1,000,000 to 1. Get one thing straight, partner. You ain't gonna get no reward with me with a mere fingerprint. You wanna know why? Blood stain and the fingerprint are completely unrelated. But didn't you know the murderer was wearing gloves? How do you know that? I may be a loner, but I still do my job. I keep up on the reports. There was a bloodstain in the scene, thought to be left by the murderer. That's right. That was found on Detective Gumshoe's locker. However, no fingerprints were detected on that handprint. Oh yeah, I think we tried that too. So that would mean the murderer wearing gloves happened to place their hand on top of Officer Marshall's fingerprint. That's the only logical conclusion. Can't let him squirm out of this one. Gotta find something decisive. Main thing is that the maybe I should see if he was supposed to have gone in. That's because how did you put it, pay your respects once a month? Yeah, that's right. And one more thing. That locker happens to be mine. What? What do you mean? I mean what I said. That's the locker I used when I was detective. The locker I still use. All that's in there now, though, is a heap of broken dreams. I see. It'd be strange if my prints weren't all over that locker. Apparently his fingerprint data was never removed from that locker's programming. Must have been using the fingerprint lock all the time without ever knowing it. Are you starting to get the picture, partner? The picture. The seal of blood in the desert is just food for the buzzards. There's only one reality, and that's this. Security tape? So long as my trail isn't in there, you can't say otherwise. That the door was open to your... This isn't getting us anywhere, Mr. Wright. Please consider carefully where you're going with this cross-examination. Yes, Your Honor. Now then, continue your testimony, Officer Marshall. Too bad it wasn't me in that video, right, partner? What do you mean by that? You want to tie me to this crime, isn't that right, partner? If so, that video is the only direct evidence you have. But that video is next to useless. It's full of blind spots. Blind spots? Places you can't see. The camera is panning back and forth. The floor isn't even shown. If someone was familiar with the camera's position, they couldn't leave the room without being caught on tape. We don't have time for your speculations, Mr. Wright. Well, Mr. Wright, if you can show us evidence in the video that indicates Officer Marshall was present, do so now. I can do that. Very well. Allow me to point out your mistake, Officer Marshall. Tread carefully, Mr. Wright, or you might wind up being the one making the mistake. Now then, let's have another look at the video. Show us this incriminating evidence of the witness. Officer Jake Marshall. Let's fast forward to like the very end. That's where it needs to be. I think after 2 more spans is when it was. Yeah, him crawling. So it would have happened. And the store is open. Bringing our attention back to the security camera. It's a mistake I'm afraid you'll soon not forget, Officer Marshall. The days are short in Texas, and so are our tempers. Could you sum up what you have to say in 8 words or less? Very well. You can clearly be seen in this video. Exactly 8 words. Not bad, partner. The key lies in a certain locker shown in the video. That locker with the white cloth sticking out. That was the witness's, I believe. Now then, let's rewind the video a bit. Where we can see that it is not there. Yep. Oh, the white cloth, it's gone. What's the meaning of this, Officer Marshall? When the crime took place, the white cloth wasn't there. Then it suddenly appeared. There's only one explanation. Officer Marshall, you were in this evidence room at the time of the crime. What's more, you opened your locker when the camera was turned away. Order, order. It would seem that's the only. Hold your horses. Sorry, partner, but you got the wrong man. So what if my locker was opened? It doesn't mean I'm the one who opened it. Actually, it does. The murderer needed to hide something, so he opened a locker and stuck it in. It's not my fault he happened to choose mine. Why is everyone staring at me like I'm a wanted man? 'Cause you're an idiot. This guy isn't just playing dumb. He really doesn't know. I hate to rain on your parade, but you're the only person who can open that particular locker. Oh yeah, I call your bluff. You say I opened that locker. Now prove it. Only this line. Fingerprint sensor. We talked about this earlier today. Lockers can only be opened by the detectives they belong to. What kind of crazy talk is this? Well, Detective Gumshoe did mention something about this. In any case, the lockers aren't that obvious. The locks aren't that obvious. There are even some people in the force that don't know about the fingerprint locks. So, Sheriff, what do you have to say? In 8 words or less. What is in his mouth? I only got 1 word for you, partner. No. What? Order, order, order. Witness? Explain yourself. If this is a joke, it's the worst I've ever heard. I assure you this is no joke, Officer Marshall. Now then, please tell us what you were doing in the evidence room at the time of the crime. Ole, please answer the question. What is he now, a bullfighter? That's all right, Officer Marshall. I believe we can figure out the rest from here. We can? Now look at these floor plans. There's no place for someone to hide in the evidence room. Yet Officer Meekins didn't see Officer Marshall. If that's so, then where was the witness? It seems Mr. Wright has the answer. That's right. The only possible conclusion. Well then, let's hear it. Where was Officer Marshall at the time of the crime? was the victim. Officer Marshall was standing right here. There, but that's where the victim, Detective Goodman, was. Correct, unless the man wasn't Detective Goodman. I believe the victim in the video is Officer Marshall. It was you, dressed up like Detective Goodman. But that's preposterous. Officer Meekins witnessed the detective at the crime scene. Once he saw the man's face, he'd know for sure. May I point out that Officer Meekins did not know Detective Goodman? He also testified about the man's reaction when confronted. When I entered the evidence room, I asked him to show his card, sir. Yes, and how did Detective Goodman respond? He saw him pull out a knife on me. Something about the officer's story puzzled me. If the man had his ID card, why didn't he just show it? Yes, he would have needed it to enter the evidence room, so he must have been carrying it. The answer is simple. He couldn't show it. As you can see, Detective Goodman's picture is on his ID card. Oh, I get it. If he showed that, his cover would have been blown. Officer Meekins would have realized the man wasn't Detective Goodman. Do you have anything to say to this, Officer Marshall? You've got quite an imagination, partner. We got a term for that. It's called circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence? He's still denying it. You're going to have to do better than that to break a detective. Unless you have hard evidence proving I dressed up as the victim. I can't say I particularly care for your uncooperative disposition. I can't say I care for your beard, but you don't see me complaining. Well, Mr. Wright, do you have any evidence proving beyond a shadow of a doubt Officer Marshall was dressed up as the victim? Well, who am I kidding? I don't have anything like that. I can see the fear in your eyes, partner. Seems you're the one who couldn't take the desert heat. This can't be happening. So obvious he's the one. What can I do? It looks like your lack of experience has finally been exposed. I'll pass on to you what someone told me when I was starting out. When you've run into a wall with no place to go, return to the basics. The basics? For me, that would be what Mia used to tell me. Phoenix, try thinking outside the box. I shouldn't look for proof that Officer Marshall was in disguise, but rather I should look for evidence that came about because he was in disguise. Why do you think this locker was opened in the first place? What do you mean? There's no reason for Officer Marshall to open his locker at the time of the crime. Yet he did, despite the chance it might be discovered later as it has been. Which means he didn't originally plan to open his locker. According to the defense's argument, Officer Jake Marshall dressed up as Detective Goodman at the time of the crime. Then, after the crime was committed, he opened his own locker for some unknown reason. The fact that a white cloth is sticking out of the locker seems to indicate that he opened it in order to put the cloth inside. So, just what exactly is this piece of cloth? Perhaps the video is the key to our unanswered questions. We don't have any evidence, so this video is my only shot. Very well, let's take yet another look at the security tape. After committing the crime, the witness opened the locker to put away the white cloth. Please show us why the witness had opened his locker. Wouldn't it be to hide the white cloth? Can I just say it's like what he was wearing? Well, what do you have to say to that? Alright, partner. You really want to know the reason I had to open my locker? Why? So I could stuff you in there. I'm sure the world would be a better place with you sent off to the boneyard. Unfortunately, unsolved cases can't be stored in the evidence room. Now I'm an unsolved case? Something went wrong in that evidence room. Any defenses? You put white cloth. Okay, what am I doing wrong? It's not the fact that wait, maybe the blood splatter that Meekins was talking about. There we go. Hopefully this worked that time. For some reason, you disguise yourself as Detective Goodman and enter the evidence room, though I don't know what end yet. However, something unexpected happened. Officer Meekins barged in on you. When asked to show your ID card, you pulled a knife on him. However, Officer Meekins panicked, and the white coat you were wearing was soiled with blood. A bloody white coat. You couldn't just walk out like that. So you hid the coat in your locker. Not bad, partner. Now then, Officer Marshall, are you ready to tell us the truth? Looks like I underestimated you all. I hope you're happy now, Mr. Edgeworth. 2 years ago, if you were only half as persistent then as you are today, we all wouldn't have to be here now would we? Officer Marshall, tell the court what you did. All of it. All right. It seems the time has come. I had to do it that day. I couldn't just stand by and let it die. I saw the detective's ID and dressed like him. I planned to take out the evidence. I wasn't expecting Officer Meekins. I knocked him out and managed to escape. I knew which areas couldn't be caught on the camera. There wasn't any murder in the evidence room at 5:15. So the supposed victim was really you. But there's one thing I still don't understand. Traces of large quantity of blood were found on the floor of the evidence room. If no one was murdered, then how could that be? Officer Meekins managed to cut his own hand. My guess is he's the donor. That was way too much blood for such a small donation. I had to do it that day. When you say it, you mean, do you even have to ask, partner? The SL9 incident. 2 years have passed since that case was closed. It was going to completely end with the transfer that day. Not if I had anything to do with it. That incident's not over. But what did you hope to accomplish by sneaking into the evidence room? When a case is closed, only that case's lead detective can look through the evidence. I wanted to have a look at it myself one more time. No matter what the cost. I don't care what anyone says, partner. That case is mine. Officer Marshall wasn't in charge of that investigation. Why does he care so much about it? That day was my last chance. That's why I saw the detective ID card and looked at him. I planned to take out the evidence. Blah. Why did you disguise yourself as Detective Goodman? If I didn't make it look good, like Goodman was carrying out the evidence transferal, I'd be arrested for stealing evidence, which wouldn't get me anywhere. So you did get to fool the security camera. And the detective's ID card? I saw that the morning of the incident. So that really was why Goodman started filing that lost item report. I returned his ID card. I left it on the floor in the prosecutor's office parking lot. The ID card I found was left there by Officer Marshall. So, essentially, you managed to succeed despite your lack of foresight. What do you mean, partner? I mean the fingerprint activated lock, of course. No matter how well you disguise yourself, you can't change your fingerprints. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't have been able to open that locker yourself. But he could because a rubber glove just happened to get stuck in the door. That means Detective Goodman must have opened the locker before Officer Marshall. I wasn't expecting Officer Meekins. I knocked him out and managed to escape. I knew which areas wouldn't be caught on camera. So you did your research beforehand. Those who go into the desert unprepared don't live long, partner. I didn't think I would make a difference, though. The security cape is erased every 6 hours. If all had gone as planned, no footage would have been left. However, your blood is your coat and your struggle with Officer Meekins. If someone was in the security room when I come out, the jig would have been up. I opened my locker and stashed it in there. What was Officer Meekins doing during that time? What else? He was sleeping like a baby. So what you're saying is, on that day, there wasn't any murder in the evidence room at 5:15. But the blood found at the scene certainly indicates the crime took place. What are you, blind? The victim shown in that tape is me, and I'm not dead yet, partner. So you stole the evidence from the locker. Actually, no, I didn't. Why not? When I opened the locker, the evidence was already gone. What? Mr. Edgeworth, where is that evidence? It's still missing, Your Honor. Detective Goodman's locker was already empty. Someone else stole the evidence. I had a feeling we'd wind up here sooner or later. Everyone involved in here is related in some way to that case. Better take another look at the files. So Detective ID card. I wasn't expecting. Let me do that first. You pulled a knife on Officer Meekins and tried to drive him off? Let's just say I was a little surprised. I only planned on being in the evidence room for no more than 5 minutes. I didn't think anyone would actually come in during that short time. Officer Meekins certainly is one in a million type of person, staking a detective for an intruder and demanding to be shown his ID. I'll have to think a little more about his raise this year. When did Edgeworth get so much influence? Anyway, he threw himself at me and I ended up cutting him slightly. I'm sorry it had to turn out that way, with me knocking him out and everything. By the way, what happened to your knife? Oh, you mean this one? I don't know what to say. So you knocked Officer Meekins out and... Officer Marshall, may I ask you one thing? Fire away, partner. It's a free country. Just remember, I'm also free to decide whether or not to answer. Why did you do this? Stealing a detective's ID, injuring a police officer. This is no small offense. Moreover, you're an officer yourself. This will have serious consequences. It can't just be forgiven with a simple cut in salary. Not that salary cuts are ever a valid solution. Like I said, this isn't your case. This one is mine. And I'll do anything it takes to get an answer I'm satisfied with. The witness has an unusual amount of zeal. Let's hear more. Can't just forget the XL9 incident. You know why? No, I do not. Well, that case was solved 2 years ago, wasn't it? That's the reason the evidence was stored in the evidence room. Joe Dark was convicted for his crimes. One thing I can say for sure is that he deserved his sentence. I remember the Joe Dark case. It involved serial murders, didn't it? I don't intend to complain about how it turned out, but there's something that still bothers me. Something that went down at that trial. Something no one will talk about. What happened? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to find out. Why is he so concerned with that incident? Maybe I should present him with what I think his real reason is. I had a feeling we'd wind up here sooner or later. Everyone involved here is related some way to that case. Better take another look at the files. Joe Dark, serial murderer, sentence, death. Edward Jones, Jason Knight. Edith Kirby, Rachel Moss, Jet Bates, Neil Marshall, Ed Prosecutor, Miles Edgeworth, witnesses, Lana Skye, Emma Skye, executive investigators. Don't know, actually. There's trace of blood, there's evidence. Blood must be from back then. Let's see. And the jar has no bottom, so the hole goes right through. I wonder if it's really a jar, some kind of weird telescope. I mean, that's a possibility, I suppose. And just stand there and let it die. I stole the detective's ID and dressed like him and planned to take out the evidence. I wasn't expecting Officer Meekins. I managed to escape. I knew Sherry's wouldn't be caught. There wasn't any murder in the evidence at 5:15. I can't just forget the SL9 incident. You want to know why? Because you were an investigator on it? Officer Marshall, I think I understand. I think I know why you care so much about the SL9 incident. Sounds like you've been sipping too much cactus juice, partner. I have the SL9 incident file here. The name Marshall is mentioned in here. And a list of murder victims. Neil Marshall. Are you related to this man? Neil Marshall. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the name. 2 years ago, he received the same lousy prosecutor award you got. What? A prosecutor? You must be talking about the King of Prosecutors Award. Now I remember. Prosecutor Neil Marshall handled the SL9 case before I did. That's right. He was killed, and the case fell into your hands. But what's his real relation to you? He's my brother. He was investigating the murders with Damon Gant, the then Deputy Chief of Police. The group of detectives I was part of worked under them. We were desperate to prosecute the killer. He looks like Von Karma, kind of. Joe Dark. My brother fought Dark and was killed. That was the first time Dark left behind any evidence. That was all we needed. He was arraigned and incarcerated. The case was finally closed, at least according to public records. What do you mean? My brother couldn't have been killed by Joe Dark. I knew my brother better than anyone. No one could have beaten him in a fight. And that's it? That's your reason for your insane actions? There's more to my brother's death than what the records say. No matter how much you try to hide it, you can't fool me. Well, at least one thing's for certain. Now we know what happened at the police department on the day of the crime. That was the last day the SL9 incident could be reopened. Not satisfied with his resolution, Officer Marshall planned to steal the evidence. Disguising himself as Detective Goodman, he entered the evidence room. Officer Meekins confronted him, so he rendered him unconscious and fled. Yes, this mystery has finally been cleared up. No murder took place at the police department that day. The things that happen by chance never cease to amaze me. At the exact same time as the murder at the prosecutor's office, this fake murder was going on at the police department. Chance. It's gotta be more than just that. So if no one was murdered at the police department on the day of the crime, that means the murder in the prosecutor's parking lot was the real one, which in turn means only one person could have committed the crime. Key Prosecutor Lana Skye. But wait, a verdict wasn't reached in yesterday's trial. Which is why we examined the incident at the police department today. But there's only one reason the defendant was not convicted yesterday. There yet remained the mystery of the simultaneous murder at the police department. It seems to me this boy's got the draw on you, partner. All the mysteries of the police department have been resolved, no doubt about it. Our sole murder took place at the prosecutor's office. The only suspect is Lana Skye, and the testimony of one Miss Angel Starr is completely uncontestable. If you have a response, make it a single word or less. Objection. I rest my case. It seems this trial has reached its conclusion. There's no room for doubt. Well done, Mr. Wright. Thanks to you, I didn't need to waste my time disproving the alleged murder at the police department. Yeah, but Goodman still had the evidence of the SL9 murder, which is suspicious in and of itself. There's no doubt what I proved today is true. The apparent murder on the security camera's tape really was fake, but I didn't realize that would end up proving Lana guilty, because it doesn't. Now then, time for the verdict has arrived. This court finds the defendant. Hold it. Your Honor, wait. Emma? The defense has an objection, a scientific objection. Right? What do you mean, right? Mr. Wright, are you this girl's guardian? Your Honor, in a sense, please, Your Honor, all I'm asking for is a minute of your time. Please hear me out. Mr. Edgeworth, please. I don't want to leave any loose ends. You want a minute? I'll give you 3. I was kind of in shock. I mean, finding out the SL9 incident referred to the Joe Dark killings. Now that she mentions it. The names of both Skye sisters were in the file, but that's when I figured it out. I mean, what Officer Marshall was trying to do that day. So I knew his fingerprints had nothing to do with the crime. That left only one thing, the other handprint. I mean, the traces of blood found on Detective Gumshoe's locker. But no fingerprints were found on it, right? No, but I figured if I examined it scientifically, I'd be sure to find a clue. So I ran over there and looked at it again. So, did you find something? No. Huh? Sorry, I guess I'm not much of a scientific investigator after all. Is that all? Please don't be mad, I'm just a high school student. I'm just an attorney. But Mr. Wright, the traces of blood are the only clue we have. We can't find something wrong with them. Please, Mr. Wright, you're a professional. If anyone can save Lana, it's you. Me? Oh boy. Time's up. Now then, Mr. Wright. With regard to the incident at the police department, does any reasonable doubt remain? It appears the defense is troubled by the other blood mark. Looking at the floor plans, the handprint was discovered around here. Is there a problem with this? Mr. Wright, I'm sorry I can't be of more use. But still, if you can't find anything wrong with that blood mark, Lana will be... Please answer my question, Mr. Wright. We don't have all day. Yes, Your Honor. If ever I need to concentrate now. Well, wasn't the Blue Badger directly in front of Detective Gumshoe's locker? What could be wrong with that handprint on Detective Gumshoe's locker? Could there be something I'm missing? The handprint left at the crime scene clearly shows a contradiction. The only thing that seems clear is your grasping, Mr. Wright. You've been staring pretty intently at those floor plans. Tell me, is there a problem with them? Blue Badger. Yes, this is strange. Take a good look at these floor plans. Something is missing. Missing? Means something hasn't been drawn on there? Yes, something that, when drawn, will completely change the meaning of the blood mark. Let us pray the defense is simply trying to buy time. Very well, Mr. Wright. With all this evidence here, there's gotta be something I can use. Question is, which item can prove something missing in the floor plan? The blue badger. Only thing that makes sense. What about that piece of plywood? The blue badger, mascot of the police force, defender of truth, guardian of truth. Explain yourself, Mr. Wright. Please look at the floor plans of the crime scene. The blue badger is not there. So watch what happens when we put him in. This is where he was dancing at the time of the crime. Well, what? Gasp. That's right. So long as the blue badger is dancing here, it would be impossible to place a handprint at this spot on the locker. What? So that means, just exactly what does this mean? It means it can't be done. What are you saying? Blood traces were undeniably found on the locker. Don't look at me. I didn't put it there. Mr. Wright, think it through scientifically. Emma? On that afternoon, Officer Meekins was the one who brought the blue badger to the evidence room, right? After he put it down, it would be impossible to leave a handprint on that locker. So that must mean this blood print was left there before the blue badger was brought in. Just one moment. I will not allow some far-fetched balderdash in my courtroom. It may sound far-fetched, Your Honor, but it's the only possible explanation. On February 21st, in the police department's evidence room, blood was spilled not once, but twice. But how? One time was captured on this tape taken by the security camera. Officer Meekins cut his hand, which a trivial amount of blood fell. The problem is, the other time. Someone bled prior to the struggle shown on this tape. It had to have been there. Had to have been Detective Goodman when he was really murdered. That's ridiculous. I refuse to accept your absurd claim. The murder portrayed in the security tape has been proven to be a fake. However, that does not explain the blood mark found on the locker. So then, assuming this murder you purport really happened, when did it take place? When the triple quadruple 7 showed up. I demand you show evidence that proves when it occurred. When did the incident first occur? To summarize, the defense claims that prior to Officer Meekins being cut by Drake Marshall, who was posing as Detective Goodman, another incident took place in that evidence room. That's right. The blood mark on the evidence on the locker proves this. Very well. Then tell us, when did this first incident occur? As Mr. Edgeworth said, proof must be presented. It would be the ID card reader. There's only one piece of evidence that can show that. Now then, will the defense please present its evidence, which shows when the first crime took place? If a crime took place inside the evidence room, then the killer would have had to enter it, and in order to do that, an ID card would have been required. An ID card. Oh, the ID card record. Officer Meekins brought in the Blue Badger panel into the evidence room at, let's see here, 4:50 p.m. The crime took place before that time. It would then be 4:40. Ah, oh. Miles Edgeworth, just what have you done? Never would have figured you had the nerve, boy. Drop the act, witness. Doesn't take a lot of thought to figure out it couldn't have been me. Nope, I ain't getting it. I'm afraid I don't understand either. He went in with Gant. It's clear from the luminol test that blood was there. However, when the second crime took place, both Officer Meekins and Officer Marshall failed to notice the blood. That means the blood from the first crime was wiped away by the real murderer. I would have had just 10 minutes to murder the victim, carry his body away, and clean up the blood. Unfortunately, that wasn't physically impossible, which means it would have to be the 4:20 time. That would mean the crime must have been taken before Mr. Edgeworth entered the evidence room. Let's look at the chart again. There's only one other card number remaining, 7777777. Talk about a lucky number. But wait, it doesn't make sense. How could Detective Goodman have entered the evidence room? Since there's no record of his card being used beforehand, he must have entered along with the real murderer. That's the only plausible explanation. He went in with 7777777. Mr. Edgeworth, please look into this ASAP. Find out whose ID number is 777777777. That's 17 too many, Your Honor. Unfortunately, I'm unable to look up the owner of the ID card, at least at present. What? Explain yourself, son. The ID number 7777777 belongs to someone with the rank of captain or higher, someone who is a so-called executive officer. You don't have the authority to inquire into such a person's identity. But that's ridiculous. Just how? I'm not finished talking, Mr. Wright. There is one situation in which we can be granted such authority. If an official charge filed against an executive is accepted. An official charge? You're all alike, aren't you? With your cover-ups and your forgeries. That's how the prosecutor's office operates. What? I take pride in my work, Officer Marshall. I would appreciate if you would keep your slander to yourself. Slander, is it? Okay, let me ask you a question. Yes? No, not to you. To her, the defendant sitting over there. Your own little executive. Lana. Don't be stupid. She's been charged with murder. Of course we've looked up her ID number. And it's not 7777777. Don't play me for a fool, partner. That's not what I want to ask. All I want to know is one thing about that incident. The SL9 incident? Answer me this, Chief Prosecutor. In that trial 2 years ago, did you really only use legitimate evidence? Ooh. Do you need the witness to repeat his question, Chief Prosecutor? I heard him fine, Mr. Edgeworth. 2 years ago, I was in charge of the prosecution for that trial. At the time, occasionally, felt the powerlessness of the law. At least, I did. Lana? I became a prosecutor in order to suppress crime with the law. But before I realized it, you were the ones being suppressed by the law. Defendant, just what are you saying? I'll ask you again, Chief Prosecutor. During that trial 2 years ago, did you really present all the evidence in court? Can you look me, an investigator in that crime, in the eye and say that you did? Chief Prosecutor, you didn't. I don't have to, Officer Marshall. Why won't you answer him? Drastic crimes require drastic measures. That's just the way it is. We did what we had to, in order for him to get the verdict he deserved. But Lana, even if it involved forging evidence. Ooh. See, that's what I'm talking about. No, no. Order, 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 order. Lana's remark caused such a stir. The chaos in the courtroom could not be quelled. The conclusion of the trial would have to wait until the following day. Yikes. So that means Edgeworth wouldn't have known. What the heck? I honestly and truly do not know what's going on. But we have another investigation day that will hopefully help us put all the pieces together of both this crime, the SL9 incident, and I don't know what to think, honestly. But I will see you guys later where we maybe figure out what's going on. Who knows? Bye.